Yo, welcome back to another episode of Mailbag Monday. I'm dialing in from Nashville, Tennessee, USA, where Trump just spoke, and Kennedy, and Lummis, and a ton of big figures just spoke at the Bitcoin Conference 2024. I think without further ado, we hop right into the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve or the Bitcoin Strategic Stockpile. Interesting choice of words. Nonetheless, here's how I think we do it, gentlemen. I posted some thoughts of mine last night on the internet. I was just going to read them verbatim and then kick it to Dollar Bill and then kick it to Dylan. Fair game?
Sure.
Okay. Here are my thoughts that I wrote last night. The U.S. establishing a Bitcoin reserve would rank among the most important events in U.S. economic history. In fact, this is more than an economic event. It is a declaration of a new era of prosperity and freedom, a courageous commitment to innovation and embracing the future. A U.S. Bitcoin reserve would be on par with the global financial crisis of 2008 or even Nixon abandoning the gold standard in 1971. However, unlike those past events, this is not defensive and in reaction to crisis. It's progressive, it's bold, it's brave, it's offensive towards a better future. A U.S. Bitcoin reserve embodies freedom, optimism, and independence. A truly American reserve. It positions the United States at the forefront of technological innovation once again, using Bitcoin to drive growth, create jobs, and revolutionize our industries. By embracing Bitcoin, America can reestablish its economic leadership, its commitment to energy independence, and begin building towards a future that is sustainable. It would be a statement of confidence in the United States' ability to adapt, innovate, and thrive in the face of change. Overall, Bitcoin for America is not just about economic policy, but also about transparency, democracy, and the empowering of the individual. It would align with the core values of liberty and justice for all, offering a more inclusive and equitable financial system. If America is the land of opportunity, then Bitcoin is the money of hope. Thank you, Senator Lummis. As an American, I will do everything I can to support you in getting this bill passed. As a millennial, I feel hope for the future of my country for the first time in my life. That is how I feel. I had the honor and the privilege to meet with Senator Lummis before she got up there and proposed the bill. She is a Bitcoiner. I deeply respect her and appreciate all the work she's doing. I'm really excited about the bill. I understand it. I got a chance to see it. We can break it down. But I think this is a massive moment. I think this is economic history in the United States if it becomes real. So this is a proposal. Trump isn't the president. So I don't know how the markets are going to price this. I don't know the odds that it actually sees itself through. But the event of even a proposal, nonetheless, is history, in my opinion, in the United States. And with that, let's go to Dollar Bill. What do you make of the bill? What do you make of Trump's speech? What do you make of the price action? What are your thoughts on my thoughts?
Well, I mean, first things first, this is one of those, this is shaping up to be one of those years where really the market's going to do all the work for you. I'm looking across multiple asset classes. You know, I usually start with just like a top down. Let's look at U.S. stock market, precious metals, the real estate index. I've got the Dow currently at 40,400. That is up 13% year over year. Gold's up over 20% year over year. Gold was under 2,000 on this date last year. Now 2,386. That's a 20% gain. The Case-Shiller index I use to track domestic real estate is up, about 6 or 8%. Three different asset classes, three very different supply-demand fundamentals. As you know, gold is an international market. Case-Shiller tracks, domestic. U.S. real estate prices. The Dow should be a reflection of, business conditions generally, and they're all tracking similar, real strong double-digit percentage gains. I think the one similarity, they're all priced in dollars. I think that's the trade, is the short dollar trade. So we're looking for scarcity in a dollar debasement environment, what's the most provably scarce asset you can find? I think is head and shoulders is Bitcoin is the best trade. And so, like I said, I don't care what you're trading as long as you're trading it from the long side if it's priced in dollars. But I think Bitcoin's going to be the fastest horse. I feel like I said the same thing last year or last week. I hope I say the same thing in coming weeks too. This is just one of those markets where you can let the market do the work for you. And
Yes.
I know I quip a lot, like I haven't even logged into my account, but that is actually true. I'm having a strong year and I have not touched I just, positioned. I love trading, right? This should be the type of market I'm diving into and finding some action somewhere, but I'm just going to discipline and not even log in and let this market do the work for me and have a 20% year. I'm not even using leverage. You don't need, no, that's, like I say, I don't mind repeating myself if this market is going to, keep doing the work for me. Maybe it's an election year. Maybe it's maybe it's simply an economy that has too much debt and too much fragility so that monetary authorities are not going to risk any type of discipline and they're just going to let asset prices inflate. That's like I said, I hope you guys interview me a month from now and I say the same thing again, because no, this is a real strong year.
Yes, Bitcoin is a put option on the existing system. It's short dollar, it's long vol, monetizing volatility. These are all different ways to express you being able to make money in the fact that the dollar continues to weaken through their need to print more. That's all it is. So to my dad's point, your cup of coffee is going to go up year over year. So maybe that's a good investment. The chair you're sitting on is going to go up year over year. Maybe that's a good investment. What's the best investment? The best investment is the scarcer asset to hold, because if there's a limited supply of it, the more they print dollars, the higher it's going to go up in price. So what has inflated the most in US dollar terms? Is it your Whole Foods grocery bundle? Is it your gasoline at Shell? Is it your airline flights when you got to go visit mom and dad? No, it's Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is the highest inflation asset against US dollar. So therefore, it's the best way to monetize the mess we're in. It's the best way to protect yourself. It's the best way to make money in this era of US dollars where our government is in so much debt and all they have to do is print. So that is get long, get paid 101. Your cup of coffee is a good investment, but it's not nearly as good as Bitcoin because they can make unlimited cups of coffee. They cannot make unlimited Bitcoins. Ladies and gentlemen, it is actually that simple. I swear to God, I'm a college dropout. It's really that easy. Okay, I want to get a...
Well, I can't let you go with the macro until I just repeat again that how surprising it is that you can rally gold 20% year over year. There is no shortage of it. It doesn't produce a yield. It's partly, like I said, my background. I started giving margin calls right in the 1980s, and gold was just the most disappointing market. There were a lot of traders with memories of, the 70s inflation. I think gold peaked in like 1979. So all throughout the 80s, we're running big budget deficits, big trade deficits. A lot of speculative community thought that was going to manifest itself in higher gold prices, more inflation, and gold just could never hold a rally, just never could. And it just break your heart to develop new business, and then I develop a 6-figure account. The guy come in and load up on gold calls. I go, well, I'm going to get one ticket out of that account, right? But gold is up 20% year over year. I think that's the only, I don't think we found any new use cases for it, right? I think that is really just the best signal of monetary debasement. And that's the one I would look at. If I'm going to change my mind, I would say if anything's going to spoil the party, I would look for gold to fall out of its uptrend, would be an indicator that maybe, the monetary environment is not as accommodative. But like I said, so far, I'm looking gold at 20% up year over year.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm going to take the opportunity to explain to the audience a little bit in more detail and depth as to why the gold performance is so important. Listen, you never see gold perform like this, as my dad said, ever, really. But even more so in the face of what is called a hawkish Federal Reserve. A hawkish Fed is a Fed that's aggressively tightening and trying to curb inflation. So let me break this down. The Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, there was the COVID boom. We printed a lot of money, and we all are going through some of the worst inflation metrics in the history of our country. So everyone's groceries, everyone's gas, everyone's everything is up, and life is more expensive. I know all my friends in Chicago, you can literally feel it. There are people in my life that are now all of a sudden woke up one day and are living paycheck to paycheck. And so what the central bank has to do is raise interest rates, tighten monetary policy, which is effectively trying to strengthen the dollar. If you strengthen the dollar, if you make the dollar worth more, that brings inflation down. And so that was his job, Jerome Powell's job over the last year or plus, is bring inflation down by strengthening the dollar. So when he raises inflation rates, when interest rates, when interest rates go from 0, and he raised them to 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. It was the fastest rate hike ever because he was trying to fight the biggest inflation metrics ever. The point is, why would you ever want to own a collection of chemicals, a piece of metal like gold, if the U.S. government's interest rates are at 5.5%, because you can get quote unquote risk-free returns on 5.5%. So if the U.S. government has raised rates that high and they're saying we're going to protect the dollar, we're going to strengthen the dollar, we're going to fight inflation and give you all risk-free returns, why would you own a piece of metal instead of getting 5.5% back on your money for free with no risk? But the market is saying, I don't want to own that thing. In fact, the risk-free return of 5.5% is down 60%. I think the bond market is getting obliterated. It's the worst bond market since the mid 1800s. And so this is the issue, is the market is not acting intuitively like how you'd think they would. If the government's giving away free money to curb inflation and protect the dollar, you'd think, no, why would you own Bitcoin? Why would you own gold? Why would you invest in real estate? Why don't you just collect free money from the government? What is the market telling us? The market is telling us, we think by the time you give us our 5.5% for free, that those dollars aren't going to be worth anything. The market is calling bullshit. So listen, the economy is supposedly growing at 10%, and they're only paying 5.5%. And I think the point I want to make to everyone is this is what is called fiscal dominance. If you've been in Bitcoin and you've been on Twitter or reading the news or watching the news, you've likely heard this term. What the market is trying to say, and I hope this makes sense, this is long-winded. What the market is saying is that if the economy is growing at 10%, if we still have inflation, and if you really want to protect the dollar, Jerome, you shouldn't stop at 5.5%. Raise it to 6, go to 6.5, go to 7. Why would I lend the government money by buying a bond? If you're growing at 10%, you're only paying me out 5.5%. If you really wanted to protect the dollar, if you really wanted to curb inflation, if you really wanted to take my money, borrow from me, and pay me back a real return, you'd pay me the growth of the U.S. economy and you'd keep going, because jobs not finished. People's groceries are still expensive, right? Airbnb prices are still going up. Gas is still going up. So why'd you stop? And so that's the reason people are like, I don't trust this fucking guy. I don't trust anything they're saying, because if he was a man of his word and he really wanted to solve the problem, he'd solve the problem. And he'd raise it up until every single bank failed. The market started puking on itself. The dollar was fully back, and he could really fix the problem, but he's not. He's not, because this term fiscal dominance is that he doesn't actually get to act independently as a central banker. Jerome Powell's job is to just support the U.S. government's ability to spend unlimited money. It's very obvious, right? This is what they call fiscal dominance, where the Federal Reserve Central Bank is supposed to be an independent bank that's going to solve economic problems independently. So even if the U.S. government says we want to spend unlimited money, if the central bank in theory says that's not a good idea. They can act independent, but that's not true. It's almost as if Janet Yellen is Jerome Powell's boss. And so what the market is saying is you stopped at 5.5%. You didn't actually solve any problems. The US economy is growing at 10%. You're only paying me half. I call bullshit. It looks like you are just trying to keep an orderly market in treasuries. It looks like you are just trying to protect Janet Yellen and the US government's ability to spend money. It looks like you're full of shit. It looks like you're going to debase the shit out of the dollar, and you are just trying to kick the can. And so I don't want 5.5% back on something that you're going to debase and make worthless. In fact, if I'm reading the room correctly, I want gold. I want Bitcoin. I want S&P 500. I want real estate. And that is what's happening. So when you hear someone say, wow, gold's up 20%, that's bizarre. That's why it's bizarre, is because if you can get risk-free 5.5% and then should be 6.5%, should be 7.5%, you should never own just a metal. A metal doesn't return you anything. Why would we all be interested in a metal or Bitcoin? But it's because these guys are full of shit and they're lying. Just like inflation was transitory. The central bank's job is effectively to be a puppet and support the government's ability to run extremely high deficits and spend unlimited money on war, on welfare checks, on Social Security, on bailing out everyone that has a college loan, on all of that dumb shit. So that's...
Did I hear you correctly when you said the bond market hasn't been this bad since the mid 1800s? Is that right?
Yes, I think Bitcoin can go, I've said this, to 250,000 to 1 million in this cycle. And that was long before Trump liked Bitcoin, long before Lummis showed me the bill, long before any of that. It's because central banks have iteratively price fixed everything, right? Like, they don't let the business cycle complete. That's the biggest problem in modern day financial markets, is nothing is allowed to fail, right? That's what the business cycle completing means. Is if something doesn't work, it has to fail. It's Darwinism. You can't let things that are broken survive. That's how you become a great species or a great company or a great person or a great family. And they won't. So the real estate market fell apart, but they saved it and they price fixed it. Now, the only market that has not been price fixed yet and saved and bailed out is the sovereign debt market, is the bond market, the treasury market, is our ability to take on deficits and sell debt. And so my prediction is this is the cycle where all of a sudden the bond market is getting obliterated and needs help from the central bank. They could let it fail and like the entire world would go through a Great Depression. I don't think they will, because they haven't let anything fail ever. And if they are going to save it, the amount of liquidity and money printing is astronomical. This is the biggest market in the history of our species. It's the biggest market in the world. And you're already seeing their inability to let it fail. The Japanese yen was failing, and we opened a dollar swap line. What does that mean? It means there's one rule in the market today. You are not allowed to sell your U.S. treasuries. You are not allowed. We cannot take any more sell pressure on the bond market. We cannot afford that. And so they're already, when people are like, rates are at 5.5%, and my dad's reading, gold's up, real estate's up, Bitcoin's up. How is that possible? How is this world still inflationary? It doesn't matter what rates are at. They're still printing dollars. They're printing dollars and giving it to the Japanese so that they don't put this fucking bond and treasury market in the ground. So you're going to get the level of money printing that has to happen mathematically is 2, 3, 4, 5 COVIDs worth of money printing. And they're going to have to price fix this market, which is the biggest market of them all. And so anyway, that's, but
you guys ever have that rule? Have you ever been in corporate meetings that never end? We used to always have the rule, like, don't come into a meeting with a problem unless you at least have a proposal for a solution. I'm not saying we're going to agree with it, but don't just come in and lay problems on us. What would you do differently? Would you get inflation down to 2% with this much insolvency risk? And by the way, I might add, monetary authorities really, really, really don't want to insert themselves into politics. if they do, then they lose credibility, right? And then markets start to assume, that you're going to do, to accommodate the income. I mean, put it this way, an aggressive monetary accommodation, a sudden easing, we ease rates, further than the market is in an unexpected way, would almost certainly send the stock market to an all-time high. People tend to vote their pocketbooks. That can't help but boost the incumbents, right? So if a monetary authority were to do anything that isn't thoroughly telegraphed and priced in, either way, you're either hurting or helping one side or the other, and that just harms their credibility. So now we are on our own. I do not think you're going to get much, even job owning from monetary authorities, at least. Plus the fact that this has got to be one of the most contentious elections, right? I mean, one guy can't find his way off stage. The other guy got shot in the head. We don't really even know what, right? I mean, the political parties are kind of in turmoil right now. You really expect monetary authorities to step into the breach and send the stock market down 10%? In response to a bad CPI number? I don't know. You tell me.
No,
I wouldn't do that.
Listen, I don't think
you're on your own. Another thing that happens when markets are on their own with no monetary authority, I'm going to give you a strange analogy. It's kind of like when the boards go down on the exchange floor. It was always a weird quirk because when the power goes out, like occasionally it would happen. So that doesn't mean you stop trading. I mean, open outcry pits don't need electricity. You can still make markets, but the word's not getting out. No, whatever we're doing it only in this room. And it was always kind of one of those exchange things that when the boards go down, markets rally. Just because nobody's going to tell us otherwise. As long as we're in charge, yeah, markets like to go higher. And I think the markets, that's a kind of a clumsy analogy, but when I look across all these assets and you look at the hamstring position that monetary authorities are in, I think markets are in charge. Markets like going higher, right? 13%, 20%, 6% across major asset categories. I don't see how that ends. Like I said, would you get a bad CPI number on the eve of an election? Would you hike interest rates? I mean, then you are inserting yourself into the political realm. We're on our own right now, and I think that trend is you got to go with the uptrend.
No, I'm not suggesting that they hike rates and run the world into a global depression. It's important that people know that they could. It's like, it is seriously like, here, guys, the US government is asking for you to lend them money. That's what buying their debt is. So you lend them money and they're going to pay you back that money plus interest. That's what an interest rate is. So they're saying, lend us money, we'll pay you back at 5%. But the US economy is growing at 10%. So any sane person would say, why would I give my money to the government who's going to give me back 5%? Why don't I buy Nvidia? Why don't I buy Bitcoin? Why don't I buy the S&P 500? Because those things are all growing at supposedly 10%. I can go put my money somewhere that's going to get 10%. I'll put my money into the US economy that's growing at 10%. So if the government actually wanted your money, wanted you to buy their debt, wanted concentration in the dollar, they would raise that 5% because they have room to, because the US economy is going supposedly gangbusters. So if they were like, fine, we got to give you a better deal. How's 6% sound? How's 7%? How's 8%? How's 9%? And they'd keep raising. But to my dad's point, if they did that, they would crash everything. And so just understanding that goes to show, if they're too afraid to raise it and they're too afraid to let the business cycle complete and let things fail, then they have to print money. So I don't think that they should, and I don't think that they will raise it, because I don't think there's not a slew of evidence that these guys have any balls and any reason, any guts to actually put things underground for the betterment of society and the economy and humanity. But it's important to know how it works and the reason that everyone's calling bullshit. That's how it works. And that's the reason people are like, you guys are full of shit. Because if you actually wanted to protect this market, you'd give us a good deal. You're giving everyone a horseshit deal. That's why no one wants those things. That's why everyone's running. And the one thing I will say too, to everyone listening to this, Bitcoin is the only way. It's the first time we've all had an exit door. Hear me out on this. If they're going to print a lot of money, Usually it's Miami beachfront real estate that goes up a lot, right? Usually it's the early shareholders in Amazon that concentrate wealth and go a lot. What things inflate the most when they print dollars, right? Really good tech stocks, really good real estate, large concentrations of gold. But here's the problem. Not all of us can have gold vaults in our basement protected by strong men and women with guns. Not all of us can afford Miami beachfront real estate or penthouses in Manhattan. Not all of us can found Amazon, can found Apple, but all of us can buy Bitcoin. This is the first time we're going to go through this level of currency debasement around the world and even in the United States, where everyone has access to an exit door. The problem is the exit door isn't big enough for everyone. Not everyone's going to be able to get on the Bitcoin life raft. Think about it. You could have gotten on the life raft when Bitcoin was $6, or then at $60 or $600. Now it's at $60,000, right? And so the door is getting smaller. But it's the first time you could buy $1 of Bitcoin, $10 of Bitcoin, $100 of Bitcoin. It is just the most equitable, fair, open. I mean, it is the way out. So you have to just take it seriously and understand that the government is trying to trick you. If they're growing at 10% and they're giving you back 5%, what the market is saying is they're lying. They're going to debase the currency. If they really cared, they'd go higher. And if they're lying and they're going to debase, you have to run somewhere. And every one of you listening can run into Bitcoin. Not everyone can run into Miami beachfront real estate. Not everyone can run into vaults of gold in their basement. Not everyone can go found Amazon right now out of fear, but you can own Bitcoin. And it's the first time in human history that we have an exit door that is open source, distributed to the people, and engineered in a way that no one can stop that. So don't look back and regret that you had a way out.
Damn, that got me fired up. That was pretty good. Let me ask you both a question. By the way, the reason why I was clarifying the point on the worst bond market since currently right now being in the mid 1800s, I believe that was either, if we're taking 1850, that was 11 years before and probably well on our way to a civil war. So for anyone wondering what major geopolitical event took place to coincide with the worst bond market in history, it was quite literally a civil war, which I find fascinating. Bringing this back to what Trump had to say on stage, we were sitting in the crowd, we listened to it. He mentioned that the big thing was that the US government's going to create a strategic national stockpile of Bitcoin. If he's elected, the US government will keep 100% of the Bitcoin it owns. And then one other sort of interesting and not often talked about points that he brought up was that Bitcoin is not threatening the dollar. The current US government is threatening the dollar. I thought that was interesting rhetoric to hear from the former president. But the question that I'm curious from both your sides is, is this national stockpile of Bitcoin that Trump plans to create, is this good for the dollar? Is this bad for the dollar? What's both your takes on that?
Oh, I think, I've also thought it's more or less dollar neutral, right? I mean, it's an alternative. I don't see that. As discussed, the dollar you can easily restore strength to the dollar, but as Jack says, how many bank lines are you going to trip? Are you going to do that? How much insolvency risk is there out there? We are in an election year. Additionally, there's just a lot of problems with exerting any type of monetary discipline on it.
Yeah, I think this is dollar neutral, and it's important. It has to be dollar neutral, by the way. Like, there's a lot of media that was asking me, is this weak dollar? Is Trump attacking the dollar and repricing the dollar in Bitcoin terms? Or is this strong dollar? Is he going to back the dollar with Bitcoin? We're going to go on a Bitcoin standard. That actually was when I had my meeting with Senator Lummis and we talked about the bill. That was my main question, was define strategic for me. You mind walking me through how exactly this is strategic and what your plan is? And the plan is to use excess reserves at the 12 Fed banks and basically start acquiring a harder asset to back our deficits. You know, if you want to give confidence, if you're going to take on this much debt and you're going to ask people to buy that debt, you want China and you want Japan, you want Russia. Well, maybe we don't want Russia anymore. We should. And you want all these countries to buy your debt. A way to signal confidence to take you seriously is that you own hard assets to back that debt. And it's not just words and promises that just get ripped away from you on the whim of a disagreement. And so that to me is dollar neutrals. We're taking reserves in our federal banks that are already sitting there and we're saying, hey, wait a second, we're the United States of America. We're about innovation, technology. We're brave, we're bold, we're forward thinking. We're not afraid to change and iterate in the face of a new future. And so let's take reserves that have been sitting at these Fed banks doing fuck all over the last decades and turn them into something that's actually productive, which is Bitcoin. Bitcoin's averages 63% year over year returns over the last 10 years. For context, the S&P 500 is like 7 to 14%. So Bitcoin is dominant as a reserve asset. And we can go out and signal to everyone and say, are you worried about our deficits and our problem? You all of a sudden, there's no interest in buying our debt. The bond market's getting obliterated. Everyone's worried about the 60-40 portfolio. Well, let us instill a little bit of confidence in you guys that we're aware and we are forward thinking and we do care about sustaining this. And we do think that we can use technology and the local economy and all the infrastructure and energy independence we could build here in America and back our deficits with something hard. That to me is not necessarily bullish the dollar, which would weaken exports. It's not necessarily bearish the dollar, which would strengthen exports. Those are all very different things that, you know, Trump and Kamala, I don't even know how to pronounce her name, are differ on. This is just neutral dollar. And this is more, you know, pro-America, like instilling a bit of confidence in people, you know, because if this Bitcoin thing actually works and it is actually scarce and we are actually to be able to create local jobs, build energy independence on it, we're back in the forefront of tech innovation. If this is the new internet, the Zuckerbergs and the Steve Jobs and the Elon Musks and the Sergey, you know, Brins, they're all going to be here. That gives people a lot of confidence. And okay, I think America can crawl out of these deficits over time. I have a little bit more confidence in the debt that they're selling me because it's actually backed by something real. But it's important, like you can't, what they couldn't do, like if Senator Lummis looked me in the eye and said, so what we're going to do is print a lot of dollars and buy Bitcoin, that would be a problem. Now, not for me. Personally, I'd love that. I have a lot of Bitcoin. And if they started weakening the dollar against my Bitcoins, sweet. But I'm a moral, ethical, principled man that cares about my country. And you know who that would crush is everyone that doesn't yet understand what I understand and doesn't have Bitcoin, because they would aggressively attack the dollar. This is what I'm saying, guys, is that the exit door is only so big. And so if Bitcoin were to run to $1 million per coin tomorrow because the US government's like, shit, our currency is a piece of trash, we should own this hard asset. Well, then everyone still with dollars and no Bitcoins is screwed. You know, how many of your friends and families can be able to own one whole Bitcoin if it's worth $1 million a pop? And so the government has to be careful. You know, you're attacking your people if you aggressively debase the currency. And so I like the idea and the proposal of saying we're going to, all the coins that we've seized, we're going to move into our treasury and not sell, not auction off. And we're going to take a look at excess reserves. Excess meaning reserves that are in excess of what's required. So reserves that we could take a look and say, are we sure we want to own this much gold? Why don't we actually redistribute our portfolio a little bit and start leaning into the digital gold, the better gold? And spade to spade, over the last 10 years, Bitcoin's thoroughly kicked gold's ass. And so it's not even about being younger, being more hip, being more tech forward. If you want to make it about math, it could be about math too. It's just the best performing thing. And I like that proposal. So you're not debasing the currency. You're also not backing the currency. You're just saying we care about our deficits. We want to signal confidence, and we want to own the hardest thing, super American.
Yeah, fair enough. I couldn't agree with you more.
I like it.
Okay, Dad, I got a question for you. I'm a little, actually, it's not true. I was going to say I'm nervous. That's not true.
Yeah.
I'm
But
caught.
before you leave, I always got to say the same thing when you're like, this is how I see, this unfolding. Please remember, if anyone had asked you when you first heard of Bitcoin, you would have said, wow, I'll bet you that's going to impact El Salvador. And I'll bet you people of El Salvador and the people of Canada are going to have access to it, but probably not so much in this country. No, of course you wouldn't have. This country has been at the forefront of financial innovation in pretty much everything. Right? Come on, I'm from the futures industry. We've always, started listed forward-thinking financial products, and yet it is odd that it took so much politicking and so much critical mass. And like I said, the people of El Salvador have more financial freedoms and people, investment options than Americans do. Yeah. So anyways, I always temper that. What do you think is going to happen in the coming years? Well, we were pretty much 100% wrong on what I thought. Like I said, as soon as I thought this is going to be most disruptive to Amazon, eBay, right? Online retailers. And yet it has not at all, but it has been disruptive to a US political election. So I'm saying, I'll do my best to take a guess on how the coming years unfold, but let's face it, nobody had those two predictions. U.S. presidential politics, El Salvador, national, nobody had that predicted correctly either. So we'll do it. Yeah, best you can do. That's why I say I kind of sound like I just back up and do a macro overview, but yeah, I do. I think. It's going to be impossible to predict how this protocol is going to impact this coming election and, the investment options. So I really do think the best you can do is just stick with the trend. And, the trend clearly across all asset prices has been strongly higher. So
Get long, get paid. Yes. My question is, coming away from the conference and the Democrats didn't show up, and Bitcoin price, it's higher, but by a couple percentage points. And it's not like we didn't open today at 80,000 new highs. And so I was sitting and thinking about how's the market going to digest all of this? And is Bitcoin becoming a Republican trade, which I don't actually care. Everyone knows on this show, we're not necessarily into politics, and there are no like left or right or red or blue on here. We're just Bitcoiners, and I actually think voting orange makes the most difference in the world, and that's voting Bitcoin. But if Bitcoin becomes a Republican trade, I don't like that. I think that Bitcoin needs to be bipartisan. I'm hopeful, and I expect the Democrats to react and respond to Trump and Lummis and all of the support they've gathered and come up with their own Bitcoin policy and engage with companies like mine and ask for my opinion as well. But it makes me a little nervous that Bitcoin's going to become the red trade, and the market is going to start to price some of this in as we get closer to November based on if Trump is going to win or not. Which again, I think is wrong, and I hope doesn't happen. I hope it over that time becomes bipartisan and Bitcoin's just starts to reprice itself because it doesn't matter who's going to win. And for the record, I don't think it matters who wins, but
yeah, but that's already happened. I mean, Bitcoin is trading like a proxy for the predict market right now, right?
I know.
I mean, it's already Bitcoin is already trading as a Republican and
It is
proxy.
Is that a good or bad thing in your opinion?
Well, there's a whole there's a whole series of trades that you can position yourself for a Trump victory, right? He's going to be, I can't remember, more beneficial towards maybe oil and gas. I don't know. He's from Manhattan real estate. Maybe there's a trade there somewhere. I don't mean, But there are like 6 specific markets that your people are watching that are basically trading along with the opinion polls, with the political opinion polls. You know, as I said, the advice I always got, if you're going into, you're trading a market that where the whole focus is going to be on a quarterly GDP report or a political election or something. And I've always said there's 2 ways to do that. Either even up and I'll see you in a month, right? Because you know I don't want to trade politics. I want to trade the asset. So either even up, clear your head, come back after the election, or the other advice I got, just ignore it. Just trade through it. Whatever it is, it's whatever. It's a big GDP report. It's going to get revised 6 more times, and that's not why you're trading it anyways, because you have any insight into the upcoming election results. You're trading for total. So either ignore it, or like I say, even up and clear your head and come back after November's over. I'm squarely in the ignore it camp, as you know. I'm not going to try to trade around public opinion polls and try to parse which party is going to have the best impact. I think the one thing that anybody, small business, speculation, certainly cryptocurrency, is got to be encouraged by is the Republican plans to dial back the IRS. I mean, you cannot trade when you're under IRS. You've been audited. I've been audited. I imagine a significant portion of the people listening have had to go through IRS audits. I mean, the IRS has been all over this industry. And if you dial that back, yeah, that can't help but restore some health, right? Some vibrancy and health. It's just really hard to move your company forward, right? When you've got when you're under a regulatory audit. For that reason alone, I'd say that the way that Bitcoin has worked its way into politics, reserve currency status or backing the dollar, yeah, that's a dream come true. But first things first, you guys just get the IRS off this industry's back. I think really helps. Is really a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said. I think just for the listeners, because I think people are going to be curious. Wait, isn't Bitcoin supposed to go up a lot or down a lot? What's the market's reaction? We just got a Bitcoin reserve bill. How's the market going to price that? I think so far it's been kind of a subdued reaction. I think it's probably because of current market dynamics more than anything else, right? I think if this actually sees itself forward and through, it's very fair to say that the current price is not reflective of the United States owning a lot of Bitcoin and thinking of it as a long-term strategic asset and thing to own. So my expectation is also, by the way, in July, August, even a little bit of September, markets never move because all rich and powerful people are on vacation. And usually politicians get back into office in September. They start making bad decisions. They start giving people free shit, or that they think is free. It obviously costs us a lot of inflation. And so I expect Bitcoin to kind of wake up. Maybe we do see new highs in August, but I do think that the asset will wake up in September. Q4 is going to be a monster quarter, I think, for all assets with the election. I think Bitcoin closes this year around or above $100,000 and then really blows itself off to a new high in 2025 with the realization of a strategic reserve, more nation states and central banks thinking about Bitcoin in this way, and a lot of printing and currency debasement and rates getting lower, a lot of risk on capital coming back into the market. So that's my expectation. I think the reaction from the market is just more to do with existing market dynamics than the opinion of large institutional capital or other nation states to the United States actually making a Bitcoin proposal. And I think it'll get priced in over the next 3 to 6 months. And I think 2025, you see a Bitcoin top somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per coin.
Well, here's another thing about pricing in all this. And I agree, there's a ton of bullish news and pricing it in and so forth. But just, a couple of things, right? Bitcoin was less than half this price a year ago. But also, don't forget how many new Bitcoins do we mine a day now? Where are we? 450?
That sounds right. I don't know off the top of my head. Sounds right.
And the price is $68,000.
Mm-hmm.
So this market needs to find $30 million in new money every day, 7 days a week, holidays and weekends. You got to find another 30 million of new money just to sustain, just to absorb the new issuance, right? We could use a halving, guy. I mean, it's still, you got to find a lot of money, just to maintain where this is at. I know people that think, no, the people that say, come on, well, with all the bullish news, Bitcoin is, more or less treading water, it's still range bound or whatever. Yeah, it's range bound while absorbing an enormous amount of equity.
Yeah.
I think that it's kind of at a balance, right? That we know the amount of new equity that ETFs take, right? They occasionally disclose that, and it seems to be like almost matching the
Yep.
new issuance being mined. And so on the borders, like I said, you've got a lot of people, you read, all those anecdotes, started mining, in my college dorm, and now can't believe the price, and I got to cash some out. I myself have never been bearish on Bitcoin a day in my life, but I am long fewer than I was a few years ago, right? We've moved, taken some profits, bought some real estate. Now, I just think this market has that heaviness in it as any type of market that needs $30 million a day just to maintain the current level and has doubled in the last year is going to feel heavy. And that it's going to feel range bound at best to me. I just don't see the parabolic upside, right now. I think it is to wear you out. As I said, this market's just going to wear you out for a while. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to see, right, a strategic reserve dynamite, dream come true. National reserve currency spreads, beyond El Salvador. Absolutely. Another dream come true on the Bitcoiner wish list. I hope I'm wrong. I just think this is going to chop around and be frustratingly range bound, right, for a while.
I don't think you're wrong. I think you're right. I think people are anticipating that one, they call it the God candle, that one day they wake up and Bitcoin's entered a new era. And by the thing I tell the company internally is you got to focus. You got to live. I mean, I run Strike like I'm coaching a basketball team. But it's like you got to live in each possession. You got to live in each developer sprint or each customer support ticket. You got to just wake up every day, do your job, because these things are going to get distracting. There's going to be presidents and politicians and television and everyone making all sorts of predictions. Here's what usually happens with Bitcoin. We go through the halving, we touch and brace all-time highs, and we come crashing down. It chops around for a little while. The market capitulates a little bit, right? Like people right now, we're still in a tightening of monetary policy from the Fed. There are people that are becoming financially comfortable to financially uncomfortable, living paycheck to paycheck as inflation continues to not go down to 2%. People are going to be selling assets like Bitcoin. Companies are going to go under. People are having a tough time. And then towards the end of this year, Q4, especially in an election year, is usually when they start slashing rates. They start making bad decisions to win votes. They start paying everyone's college tuition, making Social Security promises, medical care promises. And I think a lot of that capital comes back. So I think it could potentially be, who knows? I never like making predictions, but it could potentially be a choppy, boring, oh my God, this is the moment. Oh my God, we're going to die. Oh my God, this is the moment. Oh my God, we're going to die for a few more months. And then I do think Bitcoin sees itself to the other side of its highs before the year's over and runs itself to around 100K. And then we'll know who we're getting in office. We know what their Bitcoin position will be. And we know that rates and everything are going to come in crashing down. And, someone like Trump's going to do everything he can for growth and economic boost, slash taxes, reattract investments. And then I think you can see Bitcoin run from $100,000 a coin to $600,000 a coin in 2025 before it peaks itself out and comes crashing back down to, 200,000 or something. And with that, that's my prediction. I think I got to go record a podcast with Peter McCormick. So I think we're out of time. I just want to say real quick, Dylan and I were in Nashville, and this is the first Bitcoin conference where we've had the Money Matters podcast and done mailbags. And it was very cool, at least for me, to have people come up sometimes like, oh man, you're the guy that cried about El Salvador, or, oh man, you're the guy that helped create Strike. But for the first time, it was, oh man, you're the guy that does Mailbag Mondays with. Yeah, it was the first time I'd ever had anyone be like, man, we love Dollar Bill, or I grew up with Dylan. Never in my life. This is the funniest thing. Some young girl came running up to us, and she's like, oh, you're Jack Mallers. Can I please get a picture? I listen to the podcast every single week. And she looks right to my left and goes, is that Dylan Lieteau? No way. And it was the funniest thing. I laughed for half hour. I'd never heard anyone be like, oh my God, that's Dylan Lieteau, except maybe when we were 21 years old and Dylan was getting all the girls a long time ago, but this is the first time. So we appreciate the support. We have fun with this. Like I always say, we never take this too seriously. These are the FaceTimes that I have with either my best friend or my dad, and we just record them nowadays anyway. But it was pretty cool that people actually listen to this and appreciate it. So thank you guys. It's fun. It gives me a lot of motivation actually to record. So you got some fans out there, Dollar Bill. Get long, get paid. That's all anyone says when they come up to me at these conferences. We got to.
And like I was like wearing a Bitcoin shirt or a Duke shirt or something. You got next gift giving occasion that comes up. I think we could all use. Cookie and I could use. That is the first use case, large scale use case for Bitcoin was demonstrated by Ross Ulbricht. And I think the one thing Bitcoiners can never agree on anything, right? Where do you want to start? Block size or whatever. That's the one thing we can all agree that's got to end. 11 years is enough.
Yeah. And who handed me this shirt, this free Ross Day One shirt, was Ross's mom. So put yourself in her position, seeing her son locked behind bars and effectively abused. The government just made a mock and a statement out of him, and that's someone's son. And so shout out to Lynn. She's been super strong through his time served. And we got to take the momentum and carry it home and get him out. So hopefully he's out in January. And thanks for fighting the good fight, Lynn. I can't imagine what you're going through, and proud to wear this shirt and support the freedom of your son. He did so much for all of us. All right. With that, we'll talk to you guys on the internet and in the comments, and see you next week. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Free Ross.